Hello everyone, welcome back to Fauji Days, and this is part 2 of episode 4 that you must have watched on our channel. So in that episode we covered the different arms of the Indian Army, and in this episode we'll talk about the Indian Air Force in particular. So Sohraab, let's get straight to it.
Sure.
Great. So Sohraab, firstly let's talk about the structure of the Indian Air Force and the different branches that you can talk about.
Yeah, of course. So the Indian Air Force is divided into multiple branches. I won't cover all of them, but mainly it's the flying branch, of course, that we mainly see in media, the pilots. But supporting them are many different branches as well, such as the logistics branch, the accounts branch, the aeronautical engineering branch, who maintain the electronics and which consists of the technicians in the Indian Air Force. So many different branches, and doesn't just consist of pilots. And the way to distinguish the branch that the personnel belong to are the wings. So Indian Air Force personnel have wings, a set of wings above their medals.
Okay.
The medal or their medal tabs. And if it's a pilot, it usually says IAF, and it will have two wings on either side, and it'll have an Ashoka Chakra on the top.
Okay.
And all the other branches, they have their own abbreviations, and it'll usually be just one wing.
Okay.
Also the navigators, for example, who maintain the radar equipment. So for example, the navigator branch, they'll have an N, and they'll have one wing on the side. So that's how you can denote So that's how you can denote the branch of the personnel of the Indian Air Force. This has come from the Royal Air Force tradition of placing wings after the personnel graduate. And
very nice. So of course when you talk about the Indian Air Force, the first thing that comes to your mind are the aircraft that we have. So let's discuss that. Can you tell us more about the aircraft that the Indian Air Force has?
Yeah, sure. So broadly, these aircraft are classified into two types. First is the combat, and the second is the non-combat. So diving into the combat part, because let's be honest, that's more interesting. Non-combat. No offense, but non-combat aircraft aren't as
exciting.
Exciting. So the combat aircraft, they consist of multiple types. So first is the fighter, of course, which we hear most commonly. The fighter aircraft are the ones that are supposed to engage in combat with other aircraft. They are usually equipped with air-to-air missiles, as well as machine cannons that are of a high caliber.
Right.
And these have evolved over time, of course, during the Second World War and prior to that. They were usually equipped with propeller engines, and slowly over the course of the 50s and later on, they started coming with jet engines, which hugely outperformed the propeller.
Of course,
And with that came the advent of the air-to-air missile as well, which gradually has replaced the autocannon. And those are the fighters. And the next are the
Can you name a few?
Yeah, of course. So, for example, we have the newest indigenous aircraft that we have is the LCA Tejas Mark 1A. And then the Americans have the F-16. And the Russians have the Sukhoi 30. The British have the Typhoons, and the Europeans as well. So these are also divided into generations.
Okay.
And these generations denote certain capabilities. So, for example, the 5th generation is the newest. For example, the F-22 or the Su-57, or we're developing the AMCA. So these are usually classified as aircraft that have stealth capabilities.
Okay.
And they have capabilities to hide under the radar. They have a very low radar cross section, which is the size that shows up on the radar. So in fact, certain aircraft have the radar cross section of a bird. So
wow, so virtually undetectable.
Pretty much, yeah. So for example, the F-117, although not a fifth generation aircraft, was one of the aircraft that had stealth capability before fifth generation came around.
Very nice.
So yeah, that's those are the generations. And next are the ground attack aircraft. And these aircraft are meant to support infantry or other fighting arms on the ground. So
Okay.
in a lot of militaries across the world, how it works is that they call in airstrikes and they these aircraft assist by dropping munitions,
Okay.
usually bombs, or in certain cases air-to-ground missiles known as AGMs. And yeah, they have various kinds of munitions, but their main purpose is to assist the troops on the ground. So they usually tend to not be as sophisticated as fighters because of the nature of their role.
Of course.
But they're quite important. So for example, the MiG-27 was a significantly stripped down version of the MiG-23 because it was only meant to support troops on the ground. Then there's the Tornado of the Royal Air Force and the various other ground attack aircraft. Next, we have the multi-role aircraft, which is meant to accomplish both of these purposes and more. So they're meant to engage with the other enemy aircraft as well as assist troops on the ground. For example, the F-15 of the US or even the F-4. And the upcoming Tejas Mark II is also intended to fulfill multiple roles. Next is the electronic warfare aircraft.
Okay.
So these are quite sophisticated. They aren't meant to engage directly in combat with other aircraft, but their role is very crucial.
Okay.
Their role is to suppress enemy radars and other electronic equipment.
Okay.
So they're usually equipped with pods that contain sophisticated electronic equipment like jammers. So they jam enemy electronic systems. And they will be equipped with secondary combat purpose, direct combat purposed equipment. But their main purpose is to suppress radars or other electronic equipment. So, and the electronic warfare aircraft, there's an ongoing debate as to whether they are actually combat aircraft or not.
Okay.
But yeah, so that concludes the aircraft that are directly involved in combat. Then we go on to the non-combat aircraft. Of course, the most obvious non-combat aircraft are the fat ones, the transport aircraft. The ones that provide logistics.
Exactly, yeah. The ones we also see very commonly, you know.
Yeah,
newspapers,
exactly.
news
Even in
everywhere.
aircraft, even in airports in Chandigarh, you'll see a lot of C-17s.
Correct.
A lot of, and our Air Force operates the C-17, and then a lot of Russian ones as well, like the Russian IL-78. So these are, of course, as the name suggests, made to transport equipment and logistics and airdrop. Even there are a lot of vehicles that are purpose built to be light enough to be dropped by a parachute through these aircraft for airborne purposes.
Very nice.
So yeah. So next is the tanker. They are usually transport aircraft repurposed into carrying fuel, and they are purpose built to carry out air-to-air refueling. So they'll have these projections coming out of the wings that other aircraft are supposed to attach themselves to, and the fuel will be transferred in air while in air. So this is quite a tricky maneuver to carry out. But that's the purpose of.
I think it's a very fascinating thing, actually. You know?
It is.
I mean, I know I was very curious as a child to kind of. You saw those videos, you know, when it's happening mid-air.
Yeah,
it's very
exactly.
interesting to see when it happens. Yeah.
Next, we have the AWACS or the AEW&C, the Airborne Early Warning and Control Aircraft. These are equipped with sophisticated radars. So while they're actually flying in air, they have a lot of equipment to detect incoming forces, whether that be aircraft or other sorts of ground intruders or navy or naval vessels. These are aircraft that are supposed to carry out reconnaissance.
Okay.
Of course, we used to have reconnaissance aircraft, but their role has changed over time. They've become more obsolete in a sense. They're used less. So, for example, the MiG-25 Foxbat, that was known to be an extremely fast aircraft.
Okay.
It was used by the IAF for reconnaissance, but it was used in combat roles as well. And then there's the U-2, known as the Dragon Lady. And yeah, there are a lot of aircraft that were used for reconnaissance, but the role has reduced over time. So yeah. And then there are a lot of other types of aircraft, like the maritime combat aircraft that are supposed to detect submarines and drop ordnance into the ocean. But we won't be covering those because there are a lot of various types that can be covered. And of course, there's a very fascinating AC-130, which is a repurposed C-130 Hercules aircraft, fitted with cannons designed to dispose of on-ground threats, which is known as the Angel of Death.
So, Sohraab, very interesting aircraft, of course. So, how are these actually organized in the Indian Air Force?
So they're organized, as we covered in the previous episode. We covered the higher echelons of command,
yes,
but we haven't covered the lower echelons. So these aircraft are actually, there aren't really equivalencies that can be drawn with the Indian Army in terms of unit sizes. But roughly, they're organized into squadrons.
Okay.
So that's the lowest echelon of unit in the Indian Air Force. So these can consist of about 20 to 28 aircraft, and they're usually they're organized for a specific, to fill a specific role. And these squadrons also exist in the Indian Navy for the Indian Naval Aviation. So these squadrons are in turn organized into wings, which can roughly be equated to brigades or divisions. But there's no specific size they can consist of, but they consist of multiple squadrons. So, and then of course there's the commands. There used to be a formation called the group, but that doesn't really occur in the Indian Air Force anymore. But it's still a thing in the RAF.
Right. So, Sohraab, we've also been hearing that there's an insufficiency when it comes to these aircraft, and we actually don't have the required number that we have. So, any insights that you can give on that as well?
Yeah. So, Indian strategists have been saying for a long time, since our main geopolitical adversaries are China and Pakistan. There's an estimated amount required. So it's estimated that we need around 42 squadrons in order to actually fight a two-front war against Pakistan and China. Of course, it's unlikely that a war will happen considering the geopolitical climate currently. But just in case, just to be prepared, it is a requirement that the Indian Air Force get 42 squadrons up to full strength. So we don't have that amount right now. And that's why the Indian bureaucracy is rushing to procure these from multiple sources. And that's why the indigenous development of these aircraft has been put on a back foot, putting priority on actually procuring and
making sure it's complete in the first case. So we have a very limited picture of the aircraft that we have over here, but there's actually so much more to it which you just described. We see it in a very, just like you said, combat aircrafts are so popular just because they're exciting. You keep seeing them, you keep hearing so many new names, especially now that things are being made in India. Indianization is happening. So you see a lot more of that happening. So very interesting insights. So thank you so much, Sohraab, for giving us these ones. And of course, let's cover the Indian Navy in the next episode that we have.